My name is Jonathan Archer, and I've never cared much for theatrics. My father, Austin Archer, believed emotions were weaknesses. He built a company from dust and turned it into a fortress. Stoic and sharp, he taught me lessons I never questioned, even when I swore I'd never become him. If you'd asked me a decade ago whether I believed in destiny, I would have laughed it off. Yet here I stand, caught in a storm I never saw coming, almost as if he saw it all along. I married Scarlett in our early 20s. She was light and laughter. Her warmth was a privilege I wore proudly. We had a daughter, Willow, and for 25 years, I tried to be the husband and father I thought I should be, even as my father's icy mannerisms echoed through me. A quarter-century of arguments, reconciliations, and quiet routines. I never imagined how quickly the ground could vanish beneath my feet, how illusions could fracture when you realize everything you loved was always just a step away from slipping through your fingers. It began on an unremarkable day, August 27th. I remember the heat of the sun hammering the city, the office buzzing with deals and early goodbyes. I left early, thinking I'd surprise Scarlett. Our 25th anniversary loomed ahead, September 1st, and I'd imagined we'd plan a little escape. But as I stepped through the door, I was blind to the fracture that had already begun. I found them in the kitchen, Scarlett at the counter, Willow at the table. They looked like they'd rehearsed the moment, though neither had said a word. I set my briefcase down, greeted them, and asked what was going on. Scarlett's gesture was calm, almost rehearsed. "Jonathan, please sit." Willow's eyes flicked between us, something close to triumph in her gaze. "Dad, we need to talk." I sat down, elbows on the table, feigning calm. "All right," I said, voice steady. "I'm listening." Scarlett drew a deep breath, her voice soft but unwavering. "In 5 days, we'll hit 25 years, Jonathan. I need change. I've been thinking about what I really want. These years have been good, I suppose, but I want the chance to explore something else." I stared at her, my voice even. "What do you mean, something else?" Willow jumped in, a gleeful note in her voice. "Mom wants an open marriage," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "And I think it's a great idea. It's what modern couples do. Trust is everything." I looked at my daughter, her words stinging. "So you're telling me modern couples do this? Really?" She nodded, certainty in her eyes. "You're so old-fashioned. Love isn't about being exclusive anymore. If you really love someone, you let them be free." Inside, my gut burned with a quiet fury. Outwardly, I kept my expression cool, turning back to Scarlett. "Is this how you really feel?" She hesitated, lips pressed together. "Jonathan, it's not that I'm unhappy. I'm just bored. Sleeping with the same man, living the same life, it's suffocating. I need something new." The words twisted in my chest like a blade. I wanted to stand, to walk away, but instead, I pressed my fingertips to the table, an old habit from my Army Ranger days. "Count, breathe, don't show the break." "So this is your plan," I said after a pause. "You date other men and I what? Sit here and watch you walk out the door." Willow's laugh was almost mocking. "Stop being so dramatic, Dad. You can date too. You'll figure it out. Maybe download an app or something. Just accept it. Times have changed." They giggled then, as if I was the punchline in some bad joke. I laced my fingers together, let out a slow breath. "Scarlett," I said evenly, "is there already someone you have in mind?" She bit her lip, eyes darting across the table. "It's James," she said quietly. "James Smith. He owns that nice restaurant on Avenue Street." Willow leaned in, eyes bright with delight. "Oh my God, Mom, I love your taste. He's so handsome. Good for you." My chest tightened. James. Of course, I'd shared countless business dinners in that restaurant. And now, he was taking my wife. Still, I held my voice steady. "So, Willow," I said, meeting her gaze, "you're saying that if James wants to date your mother, you're all right with it?" Her smile was easy, almost careless. "Of course, Dad, don't be such a dinosaur." I didn't bother to reply. Instead, I rose and walked to the sink, letting the silence settle thick and heavy. They seemed thrown by my calm. Finally, I spoke, my voice measured. "Scarlett, this isn't some trivial game. Are you sure about this?" She nodded, her jaw set. "I've never been more certain," she said. I shut off the tap. "All right, I'm in." They froze. Willow even smiled, as if I'd handed them a gift. "You'll agree to an open marriage?" she asked, a flicker of excitement in her tone. "Yes," I said. "On one condition." Willow's mouth twisted. That's controlling. There can't be conditions. I turned, meeting her eyes. This house is mine, courtesy of the prenup I signed with your mother at my father's insistence. If you want your open arrangement, fine. But I decide the ground rules. Otherwise, you'll find another house, another life. Understood. Scarlett's eyes widened, a crack of doubt there. Willow tried to shrug it off, laughing. Dad, half this house is Mom's, legally. But Scarlett stopped her with a quiet command. Stop, Willow. He's right. The house is Jonathan's. Willow's mask slipped a little then. But you're not going to kick us out, are you? She asked, voice uncertain. I said nothing. Just turned and walked away, letting them stew in that silence. Later that evening, I hovered by the kitchen, old instincts from the army days. I heard Willow whisper, he'll never actually throw you out, he's bluffing. You're the love of his life. Scarlett's voice was softer, edged with something brittle. You don't know your father. He can be ruthless when he's pushed. He was an army ranger, remember? You've only heard part of that story. It's enough to scare me. Willow huffed. He's not going to do anything. He's just a cranky old man in for a shock. But I knew better. They had no idea. I'd buried those cold, hard lessons from the military under my suits and ties, but they'd reawakened something in me. I let that silence stretch upstairs, knowing the gauntlet had been thrown. The next day, I went straight to see Ron Jeremy, my lawyer and oldest friend. Despite the name that made him the butt of jokes, he was brilliant. He listened as I laid out what I wanted, a postnup that would close every door to Scarlett's claims. Why not just divorce? He asked, his voice low and direct. Too simple, I said. I want them to see what they've asked for, feel the weight of it. He chuckled. You're more of a cynic than your old man. I nodded. I'm just clarifying the boundaries they said they wanted. I laid out my plan. Ironclad property rights, no claim to assets, monthly STD testing, no outside lovers in my home, no financial support for extracurriculars. Ron let out a low whistle. You're going for the jugular. I thought of my father, his icy resolve, and said, just holding them to reality. 2 days later, we sat in Ron's office. Me, Scarlett, Willow, and her new lawyer, Leah. Leah's face tightened with every page. When she got to the last section, she slapped the papers down. This says that if Scarlett files for divorce during this open marriage, she forfeits everything. No alimony, no house, no business claims, and no lovers in the marital home. Scarlett's frown deepened. Jonathan, that's too much. No support at all. I held her gaze. If you leave me for another man, why should I pay for it? This is what we agreed to before we married. My father's prenup was thorough. I'm just spelling it out. I added, your dating life, your expenses, your arrangements, that's on you. I'll cover the household bills, but nothing more. Willow's voice cut in, sharp and accusing. You're humiliating her. It's disgusting. I turned to her. You're the one who said love isn't about money. Let's see how true that is. Scarlett took a slow breath, then nodded. Fine. I'll sign. Leah pressed her lips together, exhaling hard. It's unorthodox, borderline unconscionable. I'm comfortable with it, Scarlett insisted, chin lifted in quiet defiance. He's trying to intimidate me, but I'm not scared. Willow crossed her arms tighter, glaring. Mom, are you sure? Scarlett nodded once. I'm sure. Ron pushed the documents across the table, and Scarlett signed them with a flourish, as if her pen strokes were a final act of rebellion. I watched, part of me almost admiring her resolve, another part of me marveling at how blind she was to think she held any real leverage here. The weeks that followed were a blur of routine. At the office, I operated like usual. Meetings, negotiations, the steady hum of growth. But inside me, something new flickered, a cold, analytical malice. Scarlett wasted no time arranging her date with James, and Willow was all too eager to cheer her on. She even mocked me at dinner, her laughter sharp as knives. Hey, Dad, she said, smirking, you should try Tinder. Even old guys like you can score a date or two. I kept my composure. The day of Scarlett's big date arrived, and I decided to make my own move. If she wanted James, the restaurant owner, I'd see if his daughter, Maria, might be up for dinner. She was 22, the same age as Willow, but fully her own person. We'd crossed paths at charity events, and I knew she bristled at her father's smug arrogance. She seemed ready to rebel. I reached out, half curious, half challenging, and to my surprise, Maria said yes. That night, While Scarlett met James, I took Maria to a fundraiser for veterans at a luxury hotel. I introduced her as my date, and she carried herself with an effortless confidence. Not some flighty college kid. She was sharp, engaged in real conversations about global finance, the cost of war, the weight of legacy. Eyes turned to us, some in shock, some in amusement, but I didn't care. Let them talk. By morning, the gossip had reached Willow. She was screaming in the living room as I walked in, jacket slung over my shoulder. "You took James's daughter out," she shrieked, fists clenched. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I set my jacket down calm. "I took a consenting adult to a charity dinner," I said evenly. "Your mother spent the night with James in some hotel. She's free to do as she pleases." "So am I." Willow's eyes blazed. "She's my age." "That's disgusting." I met her stare. Age didn't matter when it was your mother. But now, when it's me, it's suddenly a moral line? That's an interesting double standard. She looked ready to spit fire, but the words never came. She stomped off to her childhood bedroom, the door slamming shut behind her. Scarlett said nothing that morning. Her face was pale, her posture tight. She left for errands with a forced smile, refusing to meet my eyes. But it didn't take long for the real confrontation to arrive. One weekend afternoon, I was in my chair, flipping through financial reports when Scarlett stormed in, red-eyed and shaking. Willow was behind her, arms folded like armor. Scarlett stopped in front of me. "I want to close the marriage," she snapped. "Enough of this. You're humiliating me, dating James's daughter. That's not what I signed up for." I looked at her coolly. "You wanted an open marriage, Scarlett. This is what open means." She threw a stack of envelopes onto the table. "I'm done, Jonathan. I can't watch my daughters see me like this. Can't stand you flaunting some younger woman while I'm with James. I can't take it." Willow nodded, her voice harsh. "She's right. This was never the plan. You're making a mockery of everything." I almost laughed. "The plan?" I repeated. "Did you think I'd sit quietly while you had your fun? That I'd bankroll your new life with James like some convenient ATM?" Scarlett's anger cracked into desperation. "This isn't a war, Jonathan. Or at least it wasn't meant to be. I made a mistake. I don't want James. I want to go back to the way we were. Can we do that? Pretend this never happened." "No," I said simply, crossing my legs and meeting her eyes. "We're not closing anything." Scarlett blinked, confusion clouding her features. "What do you mean? You can't be serious." "I am," I said, voice even. "The postnup says the arrangement stays unless we both agree to end it, and I don't agree. So it stays." She stood there, trembling, her voice cracking. "You're punishing me," she said. I shrugged. "You're the one who asked for this." Willow's voice cut in, pleading. "Dad, please. She doesn't want it anymore. Be reasonable. Don't you even love Mom?" A slow, bitter frustration rose in me, heavy and sharp. My gaze shifted to Willow, and I let the silence stretch. "You think love is a one-way street?" I asked, my voice low and steady. "Where was your mother's love when she wanted to parade her affair in front of me, humiliate me in my own home? Did either of you think about how that might feel for me?" They were silent, eyes downcast, no words to offer. I took my wallet from the table, stood up, and walked to the foyer. "I'm heading out," I said over my shoulder. "Don't wait up. I have a date." Scarlett's face crumpled, and Willow just stared at me, jaw tight, as if she wanted to spit venom. But no words came. I left, the slam of the front door echoing in my wake. 2 days later, Willow tried to corner me again. She found me in the hallway before breakfast, eyes red and glistening. "Mom cries every night," she said. "She's miserable." I walked calmly to the kitchen. Miserable because her plan didn't work out, or because she has to live with what she started? Willow stepped in front of me, defiance sharpening her features. "Both," she said. "Dad, just stop. Stop messing around with Maria. If you want to close the marriage, then close it. If you want to leave her, leave. But don't torture her." I brushed past her, fury simmering beneath my calm tone. "Funny how you never worried about me being tortured. Or was it fun for you to watch your father lose every ounce of dignity while you cheered her on?" She flinched. "That's not fair," she muttered. "It was about empowerment." I stopped, turned to her. "Spare me. I'm done bankrolling your nonsense. By the way, how's that car lease? Isn't it up soon?" Her confusion flickered across her face. "You know I don't have the money, Dad." "Then figure it out," I said, voice hard. "I'm done paying. Same with your credit card bills and your tuition." Find a job, or find someone else to fund you. Maybe James or your mother's future lovers. Who knows? They might be feeling generous. Her face went pale. Are you serious? You can't just cut me off. I'm your daughter. I set my coffee mug down carefully. You chose your mother's side. Now you live with that choice. Her mouth opened in shock. You're going to make me beg? I raised an eyebrow. Try working. Ever heard of that? She stormed away, tears in her eyes, shouting, "You're a monster," as she vanished down the hall. 2 more weeks passed, and her bills began to choke her. The car, the tuition, her endless expenses. She clung to her phone, waiting for some miracle, but none came. One afternoon, I came home to find her at the door, trembling with rage. I got a letter, saying they're going to repossess the car. She snapped, thrusting the paper at me. You can't do this, Dad. I needed to get to class. I can't just show up on the bus like a loser. I stepped around her, unlocking the door. If taking a bus is beneath you, that's your problem. She followed me in, wild with anger. You always said you'd stand by me during college. Are you really going to backtrack now? I turned to her, my voice cold. The deal was simple. Respect me, and I'll provide for you. Instead, you and your mother tried to degrade me. So yes, I'm backtracking. If you can't accept that, you're free to leave. I can't pay for these debts, she said, almost in a wail. I have $300 in my account. I shrugged, heading for the living room. Not my problem. Maybe James can cover it. Or whoever's next. Willow's breath caught, her face twisting. That's cruel. I gave her a tight smile. No, just following your logic. Your mother's free, you're free. Isn't that what you wanted? She slapped the couch in frustration. Why are you being so nasty? Yes, do tell, said another voice, Scarlett's, brittle and sharp as she stepped from the hallway. Her arms crossed over her chest, her eyes flicking between me and Willow. Why are you punishing us like this? I turned to her, my voice even. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just done rewarding betrayal. Scarlett's gaze shifted to Willow, who was trembling on the edge of tears. She softened her tone. Will, honey, go upstairs. Let me talk to him. Willow glared at me one last time, then stormed off, shoving past her mother with a snarl. Scarlett waited until she was gone, then squared her shoulders, her voice tight. Jonathan, enough. You've made your point. This whole open marriage disaster was a mistake, but now you're just being cruel. She's your daughter. She's young. She didn't understand what she was supporting. I shrugged, unflinching. She was old enough to encourage you to cheat. She's old enough to face the consequences. Scarlett's hands curled into fists. If that's how you want to handle Willow, fine. But you and I, can we at least talk civilly? She paused, swallowed hard. I'm done with James, okay? Scarlett's voice trembled as she squared her shoulders. He's just a smooth-talking bastard. He's already started pulling away, canceled our last few dates. You got what you wanted. I'm humiliated, Jonathan. Can we just stop this madness now? Stop it how? I asked, my tone calm but unyielding. Close the marriage, she pleaded. Let's try to go back. At least find some new normal without all these random dates and this stupid drama. I'll sign anything. I clenched my jaw. 2 weeks ago, you begged for the same thing. I told you no then. Why would I change my mind now? Tears glimmered in her eyes. Because I can't do this anymore, she nearly shouted, her voice cracking. I can't stand the thought of you with Maria. She's my daughter's age. I can't handle it. It's tearing me apart. Let's just go back to being a couple, even if it's not perfect. I stared at her, unwavering. No. You opened this door. Now you're the one propping it open. We're past the point of no return. She sank onto the couch, face buried in her hands, her voice a broken whisper. You're so hateful now. Where's the man I married? That man died the day you asked me to share you with another man. I said flatly, no sympathy in my voice. I turned and walked away. A month passed. Willow finally had enough. She packed up and moved in with friends, though it was a rocky arrangement. Scarlett was left behind, drifting like a ghost through the house. She prowled in her nightgown, rummaging through old photo albums, silent tears streaking her face. One afternoon, she cornered me on the back porch, her eyes red and puffy. Jonathan, she began softly, I need to tell you something. I've been seeing doctors. I'm not well. I raised an eyebrow, noting how thin she'd gotten, her shoulders jutting out beneath her loose shirt. I tested positive for an STD, she said quietly, her face flushed with shame. I got it from James. I never even thought. Anyway, I'm on medication now. It's treatable, but humiliating. I hope you're happy. A flicker of something, guilt or pity, passed through me, but my voice remained controlled. I'm not happy, Scarlett. This is what you chose. Do you think I wanted this? She wiped a tear from her cheek, her voice shaking. I get it, you hate me. Just be careful with Maria. STDs are no joke. I stared at the fence, at the horizon beyond. Maria isn't some fling, but thanks for the concern. You're a monster, she whispered. I said nothing. She turned on her heel and left me alone on the porch, the autumn wind cold and hollow around me. 3 weeks later, Willow was back, angry and frantic as she slammed the door behind her. I was in the kitchen, reading emails, when she burst in. I have overdue loans, she shouted, her face flushed. I can't cover them. Dad, you need to pay them off. I didn't even look up from my phone. I don't need to do anything, I said. I told you. I'm not your personal ATM anymore. Her eyes darted around, desperate. Mom's broke. She can't help me. James disappeared. I have nowhere else to turn. I set my phone down and met her eyes. You're an adult. Figure it out. Her lips curled into a snarl. You'd let your own daughter get crushed by debt? You'd ruin my credit, my future, just to hold a grudge? No, I said evenly. You did that. You picked your mother's side, mocked me, laughed at me. Now you can live with the fallout. She moved closer, her voice tight with fury. You're a monster. I'll remember this. When you're old and need someone to take care of you, don't expect me to be there. I raised an eyebrow, unmoved. I'm not worried, Willow. I can take care of myself. She stared at me, chest heaving, then turned and fled, her footsteps pounding down the hall. A moment later, the front door slammed behind her, leaving the house eerily quiet. For weeks after, the house echoed with that silence. No laughter, no conversation, just the weight of heartbreak clinging to every corner. Scarlett kept shrinking, physically worn down, drifting in and out of the house like a ghost. Every so often, she'd offer timid pleas. Can we talk? Or, Jonathan, please, let me make dinner and we'll discuss everything. But I never gave in. My focus had shifted completely to Maria. What started as a calculated act of defiance had grown into something real, something honest. Maria was ambitious, building her portfolio as a fashion model. We laughed about how twisted it all was. Her father had dated my wife, and here we were, building something new out of the ruins. With her, I felt at ease in a way I hadn't felt in years. She was warm, direct, unafraid to ask about my time in Afghanistan. For the first time in decades, I told someone the whole truth, what I'd done, what it had done to me. She listened without judgment, never using my past to wound me. One evening, we sat together in her apartment, sharing a bottle of wine. Her voice was soft but clear. I'm pregnant. The words seemed to freeze the world around me. How far along? I asked, my chest tight. About 8 weeks, she said, searching my face. It's yours. I didn't plan this, but I want to keep it, if you're willing. A swirl of emotions, shock, apprehension, a flicker of joy, rushed through me. Are you absolutely sure? I asked. She nodded, her eyes shining. I'm sure. I want this, and I hope you do too. I tried to steel my face, to hold to the stoic calm my father had drilled into me. But in that moment, I knew. I wanted this child. All right, I said finally. All right, Maria, we'll figure it out. She exhaled, relief flooding her features. Thank you. I know it's complicated, but I'm not running away. I never meant this to be some twisted revenge on my father. The mention of James made me tense, but I brushed it aside, kissing her forehead. Let's not talk about him. Let's focus on us, on the baby. When I went home that night, Scarlett was in the living room, slouched on the couch, eyes vacant as she watched some trashy reality show. She muted the TV when she saw me. Where were you? She asked, voice dull. With Maria? I replied, heading for the stairs. Jonathan, she called out, desperation creeping in. Look, I'm sorry for everything. Can we at least talk about what comes next? Can we close this marriage, or just file for divorce? I can't live in this limbo anymore. I paused on the staircase, turning to look at her. If we divorce, you walk away with nothing, I said calmly. She nodded, hollow. I know, but maybe that's better than this. She looked frail, her hair limp and her cheeks hollow, and for a flicker of a moment, I remembered the woman I married all those years ago, a pang of sadness, gone as quickly as it came. "We'll talk," I said coolly and walked away. 2 months later, Maria gave birth prematurely to a baby boy, Kevin. The swirl of new fatherhood took me over completely. I stepped back from the office, delegated everything to my senior managers, and focused on Maria and our son. Soon after Kevin's birth, I proposed to Maria. She accepted. We had a small, private ceremony, just us, after I made sure she signed a new prenup, because I'd learned the hard way to protect what matters. Even then, I couldn't fully ignore Scarlett. One night, she called me, her voice slurred and shaky. "Jonathan," she whispered, "I think I made a mistake. I want to see you. I'm not feeling well." "Call your parents," I said quietly. "Call an ambulance if it's an emergency. I have a newborn to care for, Scarlett. I'm not your savior anymore." There was a long silence on the other end before her voice cracked. "I hate you," she said, thick with tears. She hung up. That was the last time we ever spoke on the phone. A few weeks later, I filed for divorce. I told Ron to handle it quietly, no drawn-out drama. He did. Scarlett signed the papers without protest, maybe relieved it was finally over. She vanished soon after, probably back to her family, though I didn't ask. My life was with Maria and Kevin now, building something new out of the wreckage. As for Willow, I heard through rumors she'd taken a job at a fast food joint, flipping burgers to make ends meet. One afternoon, out of idle curiosity, I stopped by that same McDonald's. I didn't try to talk to her. She didn't even see me. She was bustling back and forth between the fryer and the counter, hair tied up, cheeks flushed. She looked healthier, more alive than she had in months. Maybe she was finally learning what it meant to stand on her own. I walked out with my lunch in hand, not saying a word. I felt a flicker of pride. She was growing up at last. But the distance between us was still wide, and I was content to leave it that way. Let her forge her own path. I had a new story to live. 5 years slipped by like a quiet tide. Kevin, now a spirited boy, filled the house with laughter and boundless energy. Maria and I had settled into a life of contentment, stable, grounded. I never reached out to Scarlett or Willow. Part of me longed for closure, but another part was too deeply rooted in this new chapter to dwell on old wounds. Through occasional whispers and distant news, I learned Willow had found a new job, renting a modest apartment, slowly chipping away at her debts. Good, I thought. She'd made her choice. Resisting my money had been the push she needed to learn resilience. One Sunday morning, as I knelt beside Kevin, helping him sort his colored pencils, the phone rang. Maria was outside, sipping coffee under the soft sun. The caller ID startled me, Scarlett's father. We hadn't spoken since the ink on the divorce papers dried. I answered quietly, "Hello?" A pause, then his voice came, subdued, weathered. "Jonathan, Scarlett passed away last night." A sudden lurch tightened my chest. "What? How?" I managed to choke out. "She was living with us, but her health had been fading for months. The infection she got from James never really went away. Complications kept coming back. She was in and out of the hospital." His voice broke. "Last night, she just didn't wake up." I stood there, the phone pressed hard to my ear, the words like ice in my veins. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said softly. The words felt too small, too neat for something so final. "Are you all right?" He let out a long, weary sigh. "We'll manage. I just thought you should know." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Thank you for telling me." The line went silent, then clicked off. I lowered the phone, staring at the blank screen. In the yard, Maria hummed softly, sun glinting off her hair. Kevin was busy coloring a paper airplane, his little hands moving with careful focus. I thought of Scarlett, how she'd wasted away, how she must have whispered my name in anger, in regret, in the long nights of her final decline. A swirl of emotions churned in me. Pity, relief, a flicker of regret, but mostly the quiet certainty that once a line is crossed, there's no way back. I set the phone down, reached out, and gently mussed Kevin's hair. He looked up at me, eyes bright and hopeful. "Dad," he said, "can I show you something?" "Sure," I said, forcing a small smile. "Show me."